So the return on giving us some of their contract work is actually much higher than if they do the work themselves and merely have a case study for their next customer. Also, we have been very profitable and growing. So as an investment, it may not be growing fast enough for them, may not produce as much profit as they were hoping for, but in the grand scheme of things, considering most acquisitions fail miserably and the company explodes and makes a crater in the ground, it takes a lot of people with them. This one actually, I think, worked out fairly well for the parent company, and it is only going to get better because the basic premise of the investment is panning out. It's becoming the case that in the military simulation market, most everything that you need is 80 or 90% viable off the shelf. And the amount of customization or added value that needs to be put on top is just diminishing.
Oh, one more question from me before I let you ask a question. What do you see the difference between the culture of a Singapore government-driven company versus an entrepreneurial startup from Boston?
There is a cultural difference. One thing, people have their own image of Americans, and most of it's true. Okay, fat, lazy, and self-centered, so on and so forth. But there's one part of the American culture which I think really drives entrepreneurship, which is Americans don't ask permission for anything. They just blunder ahead and do it, and maybe ask for permission later. Okay, forgiveness later. Which is a uniquely American thing. I don't see that very many other places around the world. I don't know if it's a European-derived thing, but it's even more so in America than in Europe. A lot of cultures around the world, especially some Asian cultures like Japan and China and even Korea, are a little more permission-based. Nobody will stick their neck out and do something that has the potential of failure without asking permission from somebody else. If you're always asking permission, you're never going to do any of the high-risk, high-payoff things. So that seems to me just a national culture type difference. Which
maybe just to debug the myth here, right? So ST is a government-linked company. We are seen to be very rigid, structured, bureaucratic.
55% owned by Temasek.
Yeah. So do you feel that?
I work for the Singapore government.
Do you really feel that? I think they're flexible, entrepreneurial.
I do. I will say that Singaporeans seem much more entrepreneurial than certainly most other Asian cultures. Every other person I've met in Singapore, I've started 4 businesses. This business with that cousin, and that business with my old guy who I used to work with, and this business here, and I do see a lot of trying attempts, and which is very good. It's very refreshing. Even people at ST, I'm constantly hearing about how this executive has a side business here, and this guy left for 6 months and came back. This guy left for a year, built the company, sold it back, and left again. And I'm constantly hearing stories like that, which is good, which is very good.
Thank you. If I fail my business, I can go back. Now I open the floor. I think we focus more on the acquisition. I think how we can, what you look at when you're being acquired, or how would you, what are you really looking at? Maybe you can ask more questions on this side.
Maybe
Yeah.
An IPO was not on the cards at that time. There were various alternatives, various liquidity events you could think about. Acquisition is just one of them.
Yeah.
So what, you could have done that too.
We actually did toy with the idea of going public. We had actually one meeting with this lawyer in Boston who was an expert at taking tiny little companies public, with market caps of 20 to 50 million. And he did it. He did several, and this was in the late 90s. I'm pretty sure it was the late 90s. Once we started looking at all the fees involved, okay, you could raise $10 or $20 million from public markets, but you got to pay this guy $1 million of that. And that just rubbed me the wrong way. It was clear that this guy was an IPO mill just to scrape his $1 million off the top, and then of course the company winds up in the pink sheets, untradable, a year or two later. So that didn't, and then later on, Sarbanes-Oxley came along, and the amount of money that a company would have to spend to be public, was $1 million a year. And actually, now that I'm acquired by ST, I'm actually suffering that anyway. And it turns out that even as a subsidiary, the amount of work we have to do just, eclipses the earlier money and work we had to spend to be a small, private, two-shareholder company. So we investigated one more path, which is backing into an IPO by acquiring a public shell, which is pretty common. Reverse takeover. You go find some dead company that's already public, already filed all the paperwork, and you buy it for nothing and do a reverse merger. That one seemed pretty interesting too, but then you still had the problem of all the public reporting, and you had to sell shares, and still it seemed like I was still of the opinion that I could either spend 50% of my mental power selling the company to the public and to investors and managing investors, or focus on building products for my customers that don't take equity. They just give me cash and I give them a product.
So it's a lesson that you need to be able to critical mass in such
Yes,
size
definitely.
before you actually
Definitely.
embark on that.
Yeah, there's a partner company of ours in the States that does about $50 million a year in business, and even their IPO plans were shelved as soon as Sarbanes-Oxley came out. There's a company that's doing $50 million in business and doing only $5 million in profit. If 25% of your profit all of a sudden just gets stripped off the top, and you just lost a quarter of your market value just because of compliance. So it's really not easy to be public now. And actually, it's funny enough. It seems that the result of all this has been the rise of private equity. And now all of a sudden, these private equity firms show up, and it's like, okay, you don't have to do all the public reporting. We're still private. We'll just pay you a big lump of cash to buy your company. And obviously, the multiplier is going to be lower because we're paying with cash, and you don't have to deal with us. But I've seen this sort of groundswell of private equity replacing a lot of public market activity, and I think it's only going to get worse. More and more regulation is going to drive companies away from dealing with public markets and drive them more to deal with private wealth funds and private equity firms that don't need to report to the public. And it's a shame because at least in the States, the professed reason for all this regulation is to protect Joe Sixpack. That's what in the United States, the average common guy called Joe Sixpack. Protect Joe Sixpack from unethical businessmen who might cheat them in the stock market. What's actually happening is they're limiting down the number of companies that are going public, and in order to get high returns now, you have to have a very large amount of money to invest in a piece of a private equity firm in order to get those returns. So it's actually it's harming Joe Sixpack because now the amount of companies that he can invest in is being limited. The marketplace of companies that he has access to is being driven down because of all the regulation, and the returns are all going to these private equity firms that have the cash and can relieve the companies of the obligations of doing its reporting.
I think the product innovation is critical part of the startups. In this particular case, because just your experience, the product innovation before acquisition, product innovation after that. So what is your experience? The second question, similarly, the business model before the acquisition, the business model after that.
Okay, so I'll answer the second one first because it's easier. There's been no change in business model at all. It's exactly the same as before the acquisition. It actually might change in the future a little bit, but not because of the acquisition. It'll change because of, when I answered the first question about product innovation, you'll see that I think there is going to be some innovation, and it actually is enabled, perhaps, by the acquisition. So, being extraordinarily cheap, I never, if somebody came to me and said, Warren, you need to invest X amount of dollars in this, that, and the other thing, I made the barrier so high for them to prove to me that I would get my money back somehow, some way, that it squashed out all real risk-taking entrepreneurial innovation in the company, except for that innovation for which the government paid for. We would write all these outrageous, outlandish, high-risk, high-payoff proposals to the government, because it was their money. It wasn't my money. Not only was it their money, but I got paid profit on that, too. They paid me 8% profit on all the hours that my guys worked. So, yeah, we were a proposal mill. I probably won, I would say,